Good afternoon to this very special time for our episode of Hired. We are normally later in the week, but this time we moved it up because it's an extra special episode. I have, and I'm going to bring her out shortly, Rashmi Joshi, who's with me, founder, CEO of Care, and I'm so excited for the conversation today. A lot of the times we get advice and insights from individuals that know what to do in theory. Very rarely do you get someone that has done it multiple times over and over and over and over again. And that's what we're going to get today. We're going to be talking with Rashmi about how to hire for your startup. And she is on fourth, fifth, sixth startup. I mean, she's a serial entrepreneur. So she's done this multiple times and she's going to share insights with us when she comes out. But before I bring her out, I want to give you a little background for people that don't know her in terms of how others describe her. Our research department was working overtime to pull some information about Rashmi, just to kind of set the table, if you will. So she's, like I said, founder, CEO, Care. It's her fourth or fifth startup. I'll ask her that when she comes out. But serial entrepreneur, been doing it for 15 years. And how individuals describe working with her are smart, focused, engaging. Some people called her a tornado of energy. She loves to develop new ideas. And best of all, my favorite is one that always looks to challenge the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, because you're not here to hear me talk, I would like to introduce you to my friend, Rashmi Joshi. Rashmi, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So is this, before we get into the hard-hitting questions that we're going to get into, is this your fourth or fifth startup?
So this is my third as founder and CEO and my fifth overall.
Okay.
So it's been an adventure, to say the least.
I bet. Now, you're someone, and we talked a little bit before about how you're constantly on the move. You're flying all over the place. So I have two questions about that. What's your airport snack of choice? And what is your in-flight entertainment of choice?
Ooh, those are good questions. Typically I try to stay healthy because if I am flying around a lot, it's really easy to slip up and just go for something that feels good and it's probably not that great for you. So I focus on doing nuts, some dark chocolate, maybe a salad. And I actually generally pick up food before I fly. Because there's so many limited options at the airport. So I'll just pick up a sandwich from my favorite New York City deli and I'll head to the airport, which is exactly what I'm doing tomorrow. And what was the second question? Sorry.
In-flight entertainment. I mean, you fly coastal,
right.
So these are long flights. I mean, are you a reader? Do you binge stuff? Do you tell me you don't work and respond to emails, or you just take a little nap?
I mean, it's a little combination of probably all of those things. I actually really love audiobooks. I find them very calming. And when you feel a little bit stressed out or there's a lot going on, it's just a nice way to slip into an alternate reality. So I love listening to fictional books on audio. That's my go-to.
What are you listening to now? I'm always looking for recommendations. Anything or recently that's like, you're like, this one is really good.
Yeah, if you are a fantasy nerd like me, you will also appreciate the Lightbringer series, and has everything that a fantasy nerd would really enjoy. And the audiobooks are fantastic because the speaker is so eloquent, and he's got all these different voices that he uses for different characters, and it's very engaging.
Awesome. I will drop that in the comments for people that they can engage on these coastal flights, or if they have some time and they want to get into it. So, okay. Startup, hiring for your startup. Now, hiring's hard in general, especially now and especially with startups. So why do you find this current climate is so difficult for startups to attract top talent?
I think because, what we've seen so far is there's been such a massive and growing demand for technology talent, especially. So depending on actually any industry at this point is really in part a technology company. Because of the pandemic, we've had to really evolve and transform digitally a lot of the things that we were doing manually or in person. And so the demand for technical talent has just skyrocketed. And because of that, people are generally paying far higher salaries than we were, about 3, 4 years ago. And so as a startup, it's actually been pretty difficult to attract technical talent because if you're competing with someone like a Google or Facebook, I believe Google has over 10,000 employees in Mountain View who make $1 million salaries. It's not something that most startups can afford. And so it's been a challenge to make sure that you're being able to build things and also do it in a way that befits your budget. So, as a startup founder, you're using sort of unique incentivization to get people to be really excited about what you're working on. And I think that's what really hiring comes down to with regards to developer talent as well, is finding people who are really excited about what you're trying to build and are engaged and want to take the accountability to build it from the ground up. It's very difficult to find those people, but when you do, it's also incredibly rewarding because they become such a big factor of your team and the company culture to grow.
You mentioned a few things there that I want to dig into. One, obviously, the demand for tech talent is the highest it's probably ever been, and the supply of that labor market hasn't kept pace with the demand. So that's why we have this, and you have these big players that are solving this by just paying more for talent. And you're saying you can't play that game because Google and Netflix and Meta, they're going to win that battle. So you like to tie purpose to part of your pitch. So have you found that is the way you sell top engineering talent, is by leading with the purpose? And how do you incentivize that? How do you tell that story to get them really engaged and excited?
Yeah, so I think there's two components there. There's definitely finding people who are engaged in what you're trying to build, as you said, purpose. The other part of that is also based on relationships. And so oftentimes you'll find that, generally, if you've worked with technology teams in the past, those are definitely areas where you can go back and say, hey, I'm working on something new. I really have enjoyed working with you in the past, and I'd love to continue to do that on this new adventure. And I think, for those who don't necessarily have the network of having worked with developers in the past, that can actually be quite a challenge because typically what happens is technical teams kind of stay together, in my experience. They tend to kind of hire people they've worked with in the past. They tend to pull each other into new ventures and new projects that they're working on. So it's very much a sort of community-based approach when it comes to technical hiring as well, especially kind of on the C-suite level. And as you get into kind of the senior level roles as well. So I find that, going back to your previous experiences and looking through the people that you've already worked with, who you've enjoyed working with in the past, and seeing if there's some talent there that you can pull from. Because at that point, you've already developed a relationship, you have a rapport with that person. They've hopefully enjoyed working with you enough to where they would trust you to take part in something that is a high risk venture like an early stage startup. And then the other part of it is, getting folks on board who are excited about your mission. And so essentially for us, at Asha, because we're very social impact focused, it makes our lives a little bit easier in that regard because there's something that people can kind of latch onto that they feel very connected with, which is, caring for an aging family member. And so being able to connect with talent who really understand the pain point of what you're trying to build, have perhaps experienced it in their past as well, or have tried to even solve it in their past, and are looking for ways to work on something that feels very near and dear to their hearts, is also a great way to start. The other way that I've approached hiring, especially during the pandemic, because it is a unique time to build a team. And we did build our team during the pandemic when we weren't seeing anybody in person. We were just doing Zoom calls. I personally came at it from not having healthcare expertise or experience. And so I was really building my own community in healthcare from the ground up for the first time. And so, not being afraid to kind of do some research and figure out who the interesting players are in that space, seeing who's, publish unique articles that speak to your learning as a founder, and reaching out to them on LinkedIn, finding their email, reaching out to them, and developing really what it comes down to is intellectual chemistry. So for me at Asha, we've built our team, and almost everyone on board has been with me since the beginning, which is pretty much unheard of. And the company culture we're building is one that revolves around having a ton of intellectual camaraderie. And that started out with me reaching out to people, sometimes just, blindly on LinkedIn, and saying, hey, I'm working on this. Here's some questions I have. Here's some ideas I'm researching. And I know that you've done some research in this space, so I was just wondering what your thoughts were. And so I find that, taking that approach is actually more meaningful. It's more valuable. It's more succinct. And it's a great way to start building that relationship because it revolves around the need. It revolves around the problem that you're solving and not necessarily all the other things about working at a startup, which are really easy to get caught up with, right? Like, what stage you're at and what you're building. And I think some of that stuff can come a little bit later. But if you start with that intellectual curiosity and building a friendship really based on ideas you're both exploring and you're excited to research together, that's a great way to start off a working relationship as well.
I love what you're saying there because you've given us so much already in terms of what the message is. If you're looking at attracting and building a team, right? You think about what the story is you want to tell and attaching it to purpose in terms of the impact that people are going to have with their work and how it's going to impact people. And in this case, Asha Care has a very compelling purpose in terms of what you do. That's the story. And then it's about like, okay, who do I tell this story to? And you're a master networker because what you're saying is you go out and you start making connections and putting yourself out there with this level of intellectual curiosity to build this community of individuals that you can learn from. And that's how you're going to build your network. And that's how you've built teams over your career. Now, how did you get here? Because this seems like something that you probably, the evolution of this over the series of startups, were you kind of learning this approach as you went along, or how did this system get put into place? Were there some learnings or insights, or how did you end here? Because I think it's great.
It's always down to the learning aspect of building something. So I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn new things. I love to build things based on my learnings. And just being honest with yourself and others and saying, hey, here's some questions I have. I don't know the answers. And I'll never really know all the answers, right? So what you're building is really coming through just a personal desire to learn and an innate curiosity. And I think I've always been wired that way. So for me, starting out initially as a student, because I've been working in startups since basically my freshman year of college. And so it started out, and people are definitely open to helping answer questions if you're a student. So I rode that bandwagon as much as I could. And I said, hey, I'm excited to learn about XYZ. Here's some questions I've had and some of the research I've done. I'd love to pick your brain, and I'd love to learn more about it and how you would approach the problem. And just being able to start out with that kind of candor and engaging in a manner that hopefully is actually interesting for both parties, so you're both learning something out of it, I find is the best approach. And obviously over time, over many different startups, you tend to kind of refine your process and leverage further networks that you've grown, different relationships you've built since. But ultimately for me, it comes down to just developing this solution that's built through an innate desire to learn. and curiosity.
It seems like, and this is what I love about meeting different people, is because everybody's so unique in terms of nobody has your story or your experience. And I think, starting in startup as a student, you haven't stopped being a student. You've continued to do that. Where some people that, kind of join the workforce and, climb the corporate ladder, and then they decide to get into startup, they may feel like that they have to have the answers at that point, and they can't, be as vulnerable to that process, where you just have continued to do that, and it served you well to learn and grow and kind of build this community of individuals. So I guess the takeaway would be never stop being a student. Always kind of leverage that ability to ask everybody the questions, because what you're saying is people are more than happy to engage. Like, you don't get faced with resistance when you reach out to someone asking them questions. They're more than happy to help. So putting yourself out there and being okay with not having all the answers, but you feel quite confident that you can learn and go and get those answers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also when people who are very experienced in their fields are looking for ways to engage, they're also hopefully in a similar position of wanting to work on something that really engages them, that kind of challenges them to think of things differently. And so, what we really focus on with Asha and really all of my ventures and relationships is on that shared love of learning. Because if that's not there, then for me, it turns to be just kind of a surface level conversation. Most people are not really interested in that anyway, right? They don't want to necessarily mentor or coach me. They want it to be a mutual experience where they're also being engaged as part of that process and learning something new. So I think if you can cater the conversation more to just a shared love of learning and some insightful questions, that's actually a much stronger hook than going out and saying, hey, I'm looking for advice, I'm looking for guidance, or I'm looking for funding, I'm looking for someone to join our team for this capacity. And you end up finding people who are like-minded in that pursuit, and who are more likely also to stick around because they're engaged for what I would consider the right reasons. There are a lot of people who also, by the way, work in the startup field for other reasons, whether it means that they're waiting for that big payout at the end of the day and trying to get in early and develop some equity and be a part of that big exit. There's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but I think for me, the learning aspect still has to be there. So we have had several people who we've kind of done trial runs with, and we've decided to not move forward with them because that love of learning wasn't really there. And so, not being afraid to also say no and just evaluate what's important to you as a founder in terms of the culture you're building at your company, also is equally important, because you can find yourself oftentimes making choices about, different talent to hire based on their resumes, based on the titles they've had in the past, based on the number of years of experience they have. But it doesn't really mean anything unless someone is really invested in the growth of the company long term and are looking at that opportunity to learn through it. Because otherwise you're looking at, people who are probably going to stay invested for maybe a year, maybe less, and your turnaround is going to be crazy. So we really focus on finding the right partners for the team in a long-term capacity, which can sometimes take more time. But I think ultimately, you end up in a position where you're building a team that's just going to be resilient to all of the various changes and hurdles that you're going to tackle as a company. So that's what we focus on.
It sounds like, and I think getting to the root of people's motivations is key when you're interviewing somebody, and it doesn't even matter the role. You kind of want to understand what motivates them and how, versus what they've done. And the resume does a great job of saying what everybody has done, but what you want to know is who they are and what their motivations are. Do you have any tips when you're sitting down with someone? How do you get that out of an individual in an interview to really understand who they are and what their motivations might be?
I would say number one actually is one tip I would have for early stage venture founders is don't be afraid to take your time. I know oftentimes you can have just major projects in the pipe works, and it's difficult sometimes to take too much time in hiring someone that you badly need. But what we do at Asha is, especially in the earlier stages of the company when we're just starting out building a team, I really set the expectations with everyone that I met with. And I said, listen, I'm not someone who jumps in with both feet first without getting to know someone. And I want to make sure that it's a mutually exciting and beneficial relationship. And it's something that is going to continue to grow over time into a full-time role. But I'm going to take my time to get there. And so I oftentimes will invite someone to just join some of our meetings for a few weeks and join as an advisory team member in that capacity. And I'll see what kinds of questions they ask. Are they engaging? Are they volunteering to do certain kinds of company related tasks? Are they following up on those tasks? Are they doing any kind of research that could be meaningful or indicative to our go-to-market strategy? Are they building customer relationships for us? Are they actively making introductions to investors? These are all things that ideally you look for in a senior level hire, no matter what role that may be. And for us, it's important for us to take our time and really learn if this person is the right fit for our company. And we've been able to do that over a period of time, and it's resulted in this incredible culture where everyone has been so committed. I'm actually very blown away by it. We just, have built this, and I just really didn't know what would happen, especially during the pandemic. I'm very much an in-person kind of person. I love meeting people in person. Transitioning to Zoom was a difficult thing for me during the pandemic. And even now is something that I don't necessarily look forward to. But it's been incredible to see how we've actually been able to build this incredible company culture of people being utterly committed and really excited about building the company together. It's not something that happened overnight. Everyone has put in anywhere from, I would say, 6 to 12 months of their time just in an advisory capacity. And now, as we're moving into the next stage of the company, some of those members are going to come on board full time. So at this point, we know each other really well. They've invested many hours of their time into learning about Asha and helping us build the company and helping us grow the company. So it's not a question anymore of are they the right person for the job. I know that they are.
I love that feedback in terms of taking your time, because there's a lot of pressure, especially early stage startup, grow. And usually that comes with revenue and team, like you're just constantly trying to chase, where you're saying, like, just don't be afraid to take a second, especially senior level hires. It's very important. So, take a second, take your time, to get to know people before you decide to do, and it's worked well for you. Now, I know we've taken a lot of your time. I want to kind of ask you about AshCare a little bit, if it's okay, in terms of, like, what are you most proud of with what you've built? And you kind of mentioned about the team and stuff internally, and maybe about the product in terms of what you've done, and what are you most excited about with regards to the future?
Yeah. Well, I would say number one, I am very, very proud of the culture that we're building at the company. I would say that actually is my number one. And it's been incredible for me, not just to see how the company has grown and the camaraderie that we've built internally, but also to see people who I'm working with grow as a byfactor of that. And they've learned new skill sets. We've come together and learned different tools and technology and been able to incorporate those into our product. Moving forward, what I'm really excited about is continuing that growth. And so we're at a really unique position right now, big transitional period where we're going from pre-seed into seed. And so the last few months have been very exciting because we actually launched for the first time. And so our product now is available on the Apple Store. And that's been fascinating to see because people have been using it, for about 3-4 times a day, and things are looking really, really good. So I'm very pleased with, where we are with regards to product, and I'm really excited to continue to build more features into our product. And alongside that, introduce that to people who could benefit from it. So I'm looking forward to being able to share what we're working on with more people and seeing how it's actually being incorporated in with their daily routines such that elderly folks are able to live better and to stay connected with their loved ones and to feel uh, more empowered to manage their own care at home. I don't know if I mentioned this, so I'll give you a brief background on Asha just for those who are listening. So Asha was founded really based on a shared family experience that I had with my grandma in the last 3 years. So just before the pandemic, my grandparents, both of whom live alone at their home in India, the closest person to them is my aunt, and she's still about a 13, 14-hour train ride away. And so most of my family is in Seattle, Washington. And my grandma had been diagnosed with colon cancer. And so, as you can imagine, it was just incredibly difficult to figure out how to care for her with none of us actually physically being present. And I watched my mom, my uncle, my aunt all taking turns flying out to India, helping take her to her surgeries, managing post surgery care. And I realized during this time, after we'd gone through countless, tablets, smartphones, different apps, you name it, we tried it, that it's really difficult pain point to manage, particularly because elderly folks are just not tech savvy. They are not going to be using the latest app technology. They don't know how to use different smartphones and tablets, and they're not at a point in their lives where learning how to use these things are intuitive. And so I realized that there's this massive underserved population, right? The elderly account, by the way, for over a third of expenditure within the US of healthcare expenses. And as we get older, we have multiple conditions we're managing at once. It becomes really hard to care for yourself. And that's why so many folks have to move into, assisted living facilities or skilled nursing centers at some point in their lives. But it comes out of necessity. And I think for those who are trying to age in place, trying to stay at home, which a lot of people are right now, and even, post-pandemic, we've seen a lot of folks who have shifted out from nursing facilities back into their own homes. Professional caregiving is extremely expensive. And it's not something that everyone can afford. But there's an opportunity here, I think, to build something that helps the elderly population to feel empowered about managing their own care at home. And also just helping caregiving family members like me and my mom and my uncle to have some peace of mind. Knowing what's actually happening at home. Are they taking their medicines? Are they getting access to care? Are they actually doing their virtual visits? Virtual care technology is sometimes even tricky for people like us to figure out. So how do you simplify that and really empower the elderly population to have the same access to technology that you and I do every day? That's what we focus on at Asha. And we really focus also on giving caregiving family members some peace of mind and unburdening them from managing the care of their loving parents, grandparents, aunt and uncle, you name it. And so Asha is fully voice enabled. So you can use it through conversation. And, Asha checks in on your mother, your father every day, a few times to see how they're doing, whether they're taking their medicines. And then she can also connect them with members of their family, their care team as needed, if they have any kind of a health concern or question. And so we're really excited to move into, the next phase of Asha, which will happen shortly here as we get ready to open our seed round. And I'm excited to see it in the hands of more people and hopefully being able to see what kind of value we can provide at the end of that.
I'm super excited, and I should have asked you to explain. Ash, I sometimes get caught up like we're having a conversation, just you and I forget that other people probably don't know the context. So thanks for giving that. And yeah. I'm a fan, and I'm super excited to watch the journey. I think kind of this is a massive product that's needed for a community that there's no real product that makes it easy for them. So I think it's great. I'm a fan. I'm going to be following along. Rashmi, I know we've taken a lot of your time. Where can people find you online and follow the company as kind of you guys continue to take over the healthcare space?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. And Mike, I think you have my LinkedIn profile, so you can feel free to pop a link in here. I also have a website, which is my personal website. I oftentimes share some blog posts on there whenever I feel like there's something that can benefit, the general startup population. Things I've learned over the last few years, and so that is just my first and last name, so rashmijoshi.com. You can find Asha at asha.healthcare. And so we're free right now on the Apple Store. All you have to do is register through our website, and then you can download the app and start using it. So we're really excited to share Asha with you, and also to see how it's adding value to you as you're going through your caregiving journey as well. So if you have any questions, you can reach me at Rashmi at ashaai.com. And Mike, I'll give you all the links there so you can just pop them into the presentation.
I'll pop them in below. And on behalf of everybody that's going to be watching this, thank you so much. I mean, it was extremely valuable for you to share your insights on how you can attract, kind of talent to your startup. And I think it was great to learn about Asha, and I know you're going to have a bunch of fans that are going to be following along. So safe travels. Make sure you get a nice deli sandwich on the way to the airport tomorrow from your favorite spot. And thanks again for doing this. I had a great time. Thanks for tuning in this week, guys and girls, and we will be back next week with a new episode. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.